Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to all of our students, faculty, and community guests. Thank you for joining us for the annual Chancellor's Leadership Series. I am your host, Mary Jo Haddad, Chancellor of the University of Windsor. Let us start today with a land acknowledgement as we recognize and respect that we are situated on land and surrounded by waters that Indigenous peoples have long inhabited. These communities have traversed these lands since time immemorial. We are located within the territory covered by the Wampum Treaties, historic agreements for shared stewardship of resources around the Great Lakes, made between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenni Lenape, and allied nations. We acknowledge the presence and historical significance of the Three Fires Confederacy of First Nations, which includes the Ojibwa, the Odawa, and the Potawatomi, and the Huron-Wendat peoples. Our commitment extends to honoring Indigenous peoples' history and culture and engaging respectfully and constructively with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities as we move forward. The Chancellor's Leadership Series strives to inspire and promote leadership while embracing our themes of innovation, entrepreneurship, sustainability, and diversity. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsor, Telus, for their renewed commitment to both today's event and, importantly, for their support of the annual Chancellor's Leadership Scholarship. Today, I am very pleased to announce the 2024 scholarship recipient is Adeline Luador from the Faculty of Law. Where are you, Adeline? I know you're here somewhere. Please join me in congratulating Adeline. If you haven't done so already, you can read all about her incredible accomplishments and her incredible work on the newsletter, I believe issued yesterday. And now for our special guest. I feel like Julia's been here all week. She has been most gracious in providing us with her insights and her expertise. As you know, and I know you've read, Julia Deans is President and CEO of Habitat for Humanity Canada, a 46 local member federation focused on safe and affordable housing for all. With degrees from Queen's University, Columbia University, and Osgoode Hall Law School, Julia practiced law with Torrey's LLP in Toronto and Hong Kong, and built a business in Singapore before becoming CEO of several organizations, including Civic Action, Futurepreneur Canada, and the Canada Children's Literacy Foundation. And she was also chair of Ontario's Expert Roundtable on Immigration. A celebrated Canadian leader who has served as a role model and mentor for many, Julia has been named to WXN's Top 100 Most Powerful Women, a YWCA Toronto Woman of Distinction, and a Woman of Influence, a Canadian Diversity Champion. She received the Pearson Centre for Progressive Policy Leadership Award, the Goodman School of Business Distinguished Leader Award, and the Le Prix Hommage Lèvres Ontario 2020 Award. Julia has her ICD designation and is a director of Invest Eco Capital and the Canada Post Community Foundation. And impressively, she is an honorary lieutenant colonel in the Canadian Armed Forces. Not too shabby a CV. So please welcome me in joining Julia, and I'm going to take a seat and we're going to start a dialogue. Recall that we will have opportunity for questions. I know some of you have submitted in advance, and I do have those, and we'll be asking Julia. And if you have in the audience, we'll take those at the end. So you understand from the CV overview, Julia Deans is a builder. And I don't say that tongue-in-cheek. I know as Habitat for Humanity is your current CEO role, but she's a builder, she's a connector. From her impressive bio, you know that her career has not been a cookie-cutter journey. She is a respected lawyer and business leader, a builder of community and civic action, a role model for strong personal values, and a determination to make a difference. Julia is a champion for recognizing the economic and social benefits of integrating sustainable and resilient housing practices and immigration supports. And I know we have lots to talk about. Today is about leadership. And so we're going to start today by asking you, Julia, given your unbelievable journey, can you just give us a share of your insights into both your history, your career, your life, whatever you'd like to share with us so we get to know you a little bit better?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for making me your guest this year, and thank you all for having me. I said when I was coming here, I looked at my LinkedIn to see what my connections with University of Windsor were, and they were many. And it kind of astounded me how many people, great, interesting, wonderful people I know who have come from this university, from grads from a long time ago to quite recent grads. And this university is known for producing graduates who are not just smart and able to do what they were trained to do, but are very connected to the world and to the community in a way that you don't see coming out of other schools. So it's really been nice to come here and spend time on campus and see for myself how that comes to be in the law school yesterday. With Brady and Hayden and the hockey team players who are out building homes destroyed by wildfire. This is clearly a place where people care about the world and the community, and that's a lovely thing to see, and will serve everybody well in the future, including the university. Also fun to be here because we have an incredibly vibrant habitat in Windsor, Essex, and the chair, Lindsay, and our soon-to-be treasurer, Masuda, here today from Habitat Windsor. If you don't know Habitat for Humanity, we build homes for families. We refurbish social service agency builds for youth and others, people fleeing violence who need help. We provide furniture. We have restores, which are great for students. We restore community gardens and make them places where people can build gardens and connect. So Habitat's a great organization. So if there is anybody here who is not volunteering or involved, please think of Habitat. Also a great partner to the university, most recently on some 3D built homes, which we partnered on. So I love being here at this place with Habitat. And to share something I care so much about, which is how do you become a leader and bring what you can to the world. Briefly about myself, I was born in downtown Toronto, so one of the rare people in Toronto who was actually born there. My father was an Australian young lawyer who came as a Rotary Fellow and met my mom and never left. So from him, I had a sensibility of law and private sector work. My mother was deeply embedded in not-for-profit and public service work. So I had these two things, and back in that day, you kind of went one or the other. And I think what I have done is bring the two together because I care about them so much. So I went the politics, public government law route and started my career as a lawyer at Torrey's, which is a big law firm on Bay Street. Interestingly, I was able to do some pretty interesting work there, including work for the Native Women's Association of Canada and a lot of environmental law. So I was able to satisfy my public service itch, if you will, and learn. And I've always gone after getting the absolute best learning and training I can get, and I certainly got that at Torrey's as well as in the schools that I was able to go to. My mother had lived in the Philippines working in development during the revolution. My father was Australian. I thought I need to go live in Asia. Happily, I married somebody who thought the same way I did. So with a very young family, we moved to Hong Kong. I was able to work with my law firm Torrey's there, but I went from having 300 lawyers in my office to 2, myself and the managing partner. But it gave me the liberty to do lots of neat things. So I was working on environmental policy and law development around the region. I was very involved in the Hong Kong Environmental Law Association. I got involved in a lot of women's leadership things. Then we moved to Singapore after I had done the work to become a lawyer in Hong Kong. And I thought, I want to prove I can make money. And I couldn't really be a lawyer there because I would have had to been on plane 5 days a week, which didn't really work out with little kids. But the leading legal recruiter said, would you build our business for us? And I thought this could be my way of seeing if I can make money. So and I connect people in my sleep. So it was very easy to become a legal recruiter and move lawyers from Canada to Hong Kong and Australia to Indonesia and vice versa, and see if I could build a business in a new country where there's a lot to learn. So I built the business, and we did exceptionally well, and then sold to a big international company that owned Monster.com, which I don't even know if it exists anymore. Does anybody know? Is there still Monster.com? No? Okay, well, it's old school. But then I said, okay, now I've proven I've made money. Now I can do what I really love, which is public service. And came back to Canada, got my kids sorted out, and then I had the great fortune of meeting a man named David Pico, who is responsible for introducing me to the Chancellor as well. And he had started an organization called Civic Action, which is about bringing leaders from different sectors together to tackle big social and economic challenges. And at the time, the Toronto region was facing many of these. How do we integrate skilled immigrants so that they are able to use their full experience and skills? How do we develop the next generation of emerging leaders? How do we reduce carbon emissions in our commercial buildings? How do we create an international arts festival? How do we smooth the path for people from welfare to work, because it was a very fraught path? So I just love this. I'm a stimulus junkie, and it was just great. Give me a problem, and I'll go after it. And one by one, we would build large tables of leaders from different sectors to take on these big issues. And that became really my expertise and what I love to do. And the power of building bridges between the private sector and the not-for-profit and the public sector was just intoxicating. And helping them to see how they could talk to each other and why they should. And the conversations weren't happening. So I think that's something that I learned I could lead and bring people into that, either from the front or from behind. And that's something about leadership that many of you will know, is you're not always standing in front as Chancellor. You may be not seen, but you're the one who has set the table. You're the one who's fed the conversation and created the place where people can actually take action. And that I get a lot of satisfaction from, and that I was able to do very, very well there. I'll just give you one example, because sometimes it helps. And the Chancellor used to be on the board of TD Bank, and I think Lindsay works there. But once we had a big environmental initiative, and one of the very top people, massive office, very powerful guy, very seized of the environment. But he had two of the leaders of two of the biggest environmental organizations come to see him. And they came and they said, we've invented a tool so that any organization can rate itself on how good a job it's doing on the environment. And it's 1 to 5, but of course TD Bank would never be the 5, the perfect number, because it's a bank. You know, it's a bank, it's private sector, they couldn't do it. And this fellow turned to them and he said, normally I would say, thank you so much for coming to see me. That's so interesting. And I would see you at the door. He said, but I'm going to tell you what you just said completely turned me off. And as a business, we don't want to hear we can't be the best. We want to hear this is how you become the best. And the minute you said that, you lost me. And normally I would just say goodbye. We wouldn't talk again. But because they had been sitting at these same tables, they were able to talk. And the environmental guys were just shattered. But that is the sort of thing that satisfies me a lot, because from then on, those environmental activists will always think differently when they're talking to people in another sector. So I went through that organization. It was wonderful. Our founder died, which almost killed me too, because he was so marvelous. Kept the organization together through that, rebuilt it, got a new chair, and then decided it was time to do something different. I went to Futurepreneur Canada. I'm really hoping some of you know that organization, which helps young people launch businesses across the country with mentoring and money and resources. Built that up and built up the team to, I think we're starting 1,000 businesses a year, and some of them you will know, like Nixware and Chicopee and some very cool businesses. Got that running smoothly, and then obviously I get bored. I went and started the Canadian Children's Literacy Foundation, which was about helping young people learn to read, and too many people don't know how to read, and boy, they're going to have terrible outcomes if they don't. So we got that launched. And then along came Habitat, and Habitat for Humanity, this wonderful organization, 70 countries around the world, with the vision of everyone needs a safe and affordable place to call home. And I realized I'm all about how do you connect people to their potential, and if you haven't got a good place to sleep at night, there's not much you can do. So I got very excited about Habitat. We've had an extraordinary time. I started 3 weeks before COVID hit. Kind of held the organization together through that early part because I could. And now we have some pretty exciting things going on. Windsor is a great example. We build houses, we support work around the world, from building rental housing for people fleeing Ukraine to water and sanitation. We started a critical repairs program to help people stay in affordable homes, which are being lost way too fast. And it's been a pretty exciting ride. So it may sound kind of frenetic. To me, it all links as how do you help people achieve their potential, and if there's something I can do, I'm going to do it.
So fairly atypical, right, in terms of both your journey. You can sense your passion in all the roles that you've taken on. Talk to us a little bit about success. What did that feel like? What are you proudest of in terms of accomplishments, given the broad array of jobs and roles and influence you've had?
Yeah, and I may have mentioned it. I think it's the people whose lives that you touch. But the really exciting thing is somebody who you help them unleash a power that they have, and they're going to continue to amplify things going forward. We started something called the Diversity Fellows at Civic Action, which is helping people from diverse backgrounds achieve their potential as leaders. And very often, it certainly wasn't anything to do with their being motivated or their intelligence. It was about their connections and giving them access to other people who could feed their ideas, get them resources, give them confidence that they have a good idea. And to see those people now, they are everywhere, and they are flourishing, and they are the people who are leading the country. But we are a country of networks, but people don't jealously guard their networks. So, but accessing them can be hard. It's easier for someone like me, who looks like I do, who was born in downtown Toronto, who's had the privileges I've had, I just time after time see what happens when you open a door and walk through it or welcome somebody into it, and how it can change their life and give them the confidence that they have something to do. So when I see someone like Joanna Griffiths, who built a business called Knixwear, and I don't think they do men's thing, but women might have heard of it, and she built it's a huge Canadian business now, huge success story. And I remember being in her basement when we gave her the first loan of $30,000, and it was Johanna and a part-time bookkeeper, and look what she's done. That gives me a real thrill, real thrill.
How exciting and rewarding, people reaching their potential. It's kind of a thread through a lot of the work that you've done. So if you turn back the clock a bit, since we have a lot of students in the audience today, what would you tell your 20-some-year-old self, given the journey you've been on, and as an inspiration to these young people?
I think to be open to anything, to put yourself out to get new experiences. And I'm still doing it today. You mentioned I joined the Canadian military. I'm an honorary lieutenant colonel in the military police regiment. And I don't know if any of you have military experience, but the learning curve is literally like that. And just learning people's titles and how to stand and how to salute and how to put the uniform on. And I'm so humbled by what these people do. But I'm learning all the time. And so you're in a perfect place if you're students to be both learning in the school, but to have the kind of experiences that these fellows had in Kelowna, building corrals in Kelowna. That's very cool. So many of the law students, and I see some of them here today, are getting involved in student government, are working on housing issues. This is just such a great place to see everything that's out there and what lights you up. So take those opportunities to go and see what is happening around you, what really excites you. Working is hard. You've got to do something that you like. But the big thing is that there are so many people to help. And I mentioned networks. And I don't think I realized when I was 20 how the people I met when I was 20 were going to stay in my life forever. And were going to be the people who introduced me to David Pico, which is exactly what happened, who are the people who may be working at Bank of Montreal and come and fund the women's shelter that you're running. The people are there. And even if you don't know them, people are always happy to hear from you. I met with some of the law students yesterday and said, if there's somebody who interests you and they're doing something that you find fascinating, you think that they might have advice for you, reach out, say, I'm fascinated by your career. Would you spend 15 to 20 minutes talking to me about what you're seeing in this field now, how you got to where you are, so I can learn something from you? And I would bet anybody that 90% of people will say, I will do that. Maybe I can't do it this month, I'm very busy, but I will do that. And the 1% or 10% who say no, just ignore them and keep going. But seriously, people love to share their experience. We're so invested in people coming up behind us and doing the work that we did before. And I'm sure you had that experience with the hospital. Absolutely. You needed great people to take over your role, or what have you left behind? Not much. So to have that confidence to walk through the door, to go and open the door and go and talk to people. And I do recognize how hard that can be if you're not from Canada, if you're going into a field like law that you don't know any lawyers. That can be really hard, but there are ways to get to those people, and they will help you for the rest of your life.
Really, really terrific advice, and it takes courage sometimes to do that. But I think the takeaway, and I've had the same experience, is most people will find the time. It might not be in the moment, but they will find the time. So take that step. One of the things you shared yesterday, I want to pull out a little bit. You were talking to the law and poli-sci students about your journey starting in law, leaving law, coming back to law, and then the journey you shared with us today. Oftentimes we make a decision when we're in our 20s about the career we're going to take on. And I, like you, veered, stayed in healthcare, but wasn't doing nursing at the bedside for most of it. Can you just share a little bit about the personal dilemma, the challenge you have in making the decision that it's okay to turn right or to turn left when you've taken a decision? Sometimes, a tough decision. Money is involved, disappointment of parents is involved. Share a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, well, we were talking about in law school how hard it can be to not go the traditional route, and many people want to practice as a lawyer, and how hard that can be to not think about what people around you are thinking. But that's true in a lot of disciplines, and there probably are people here studying business, and people will say, well, of course you're going to go work in business, that's what you're going to do, but you may not want to, and how hard that can be to go a different route. For myself, my mantra or philosophy is to do things where more doors are going to open at the other end, and that I think I've been able to do, so that I've always had choices. I could go back to the private sector, stay in the not-for-profit sector, and have more choices. So I try to evaluate things that way. And where am I going to get the most satisfaction? As I said, I think working is really hard. You're not going to love anything you do 100% of the time, but you better love it 40% of the time. You better love it 40% of the time, or have something that you do outside of work that you love, and that the work is enabling you to do that. And if you live true to those things, you're doing something that interests you, you're doing something that is making good use of your skills, I think you're going to land in a good place. I would suspect that most people here aren't thinking they're going to have a forever job and they're going to do that for 40 years as we might have thought. I think of how many jobs didn't exist 10 or 15 years ago, even compared to a year ago with ChatGPT. Life is completely different than it was a year ago. And so thinking of what is the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, what can you do during that time that will be really satisfying and set you up for whatever comes in the 2 or 3 or 4 years after that. And learning nonstop is going to be pretty key to that, I'm quite sure.
It's so important to bringing your best self to work, whatever your work is.
Yeah.
So you've got to love it. You've got to find the passion for it, and you're influencing so many other people in the decisions you take. So I think your story and the journey you've been on and the challenges you've taken on, the impact that you've had is a real testament to being very grounded in what's important and your values.
Yeah, showing up.
And showing up.
Showing up is a really, really big thing. Showing up and saying something and being part of things and not being silent. And sometimes we were talking about how sometimes people see leadership as being President Graham at the university, being the Chancellor, being the CEO. But leadership happens, and I'm sure you've all seen it, in lots of different places. It happens in your family, it happens in student government, it happens in teams that you're working on in projects. And you always have a choice about how you show up in those places. And you can sit there and sit on your hands and do nothing, or you can contribute, or you can lead. And the best ideas can come from the newest person in the room, so that there will always be an opportunity to lead in whatever way you choose. And I think trying out that muscle and seeing how you exercise it is good. COVID was amazing for that. It turned our world on its head. And people who hadn't been leaders before, but who were good in an emergency, who could see clarity when everything was like this, really stepped up. And it's been exciting. And I think that brought some people a really exciting new muscle. For other people, it was quite horrible because they were so used to leading in a certain way, and that was off the table. But those people who showed up, I think, felt pretty good about it.
It's a good segue into COVID also really exposed so many injustices that really were brought to the fore, inequities and that many people are facing that we didn't talk about enough. We didn't have front and center enough, especially housing and homelessness. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. You've been a champion of habitat, of housing, of connecting people to reach their potential, to have the supports that they need. Maybe talk to us about how we can make a difference as individuals, both on this pressing issue in our community. We had a roundtable this morning of leaders in the university talking about what we can be doing both as a university, as partners in a community. Can you just share with us your insights? You've been around the country, you've seen the engagement of thousands of people. How can we as individuals wrestle with this issue and help advocate for change?
Yeah, well, there cannot be a person in this room who has not been touched by the housing crisis. There cannot be. It's affecting you in your family. It's affecting you as a student and the choices you have about where you're going to live. It's affecting the people who work in around you. There's nobody who's unaware of the housing crisis and I think isn't worried about it. So this is something where we each have a responsibility to do something, whether it's to contribute resources, to use our muscle, to use our voices, and speak to what we're seeing and that we need to change things. We have a housing spectrum, and at Habitat Canada, we are focused on affordable home ownership. Home ownership has always been a very strong bedrock of Canadian society. About 70% of Canadians own their own homes, and there's a good reason for that. It's the place that you can be secure and stable. No landlord's going to rent evict you. You're going to be able to save money and build equity and invest in your kids' education, invest in a business, what have you. And that bedrock is kind of crumbling because we've put it out of reach for many. So we believe that that's an important thing, and that people need access to be able to own their own homes. But we also believe that you need to invest along the housing spectrum, from people who are living without any shelter at all to shelter housing, affordable rental, et cetera. And all those pieces need to work. So if you put everybody into one part, you get a logjam. You need a system that works. So we use our voice to call for change along the spectrum, and you can do that too. Windsor's dealing with a lot of housing pressure. The prices have gone up, I think, threefold in about a decade. It's quite extraordinary. There's a big influx of people. There aren't enough houses being built for those people. Student housing is at a premium, although we heard this morning about the great planning that's going on at the university. I'll just use one example. Your city government recently decided not to take some federal funding, very significant federal funding, because it was going to change zoning. And that must have been a really hard decision for the city to make. It's become national news. Why would somebody not want to take the money to invest in housing? But I do think that it's probably because the city government or the city officials were sitting a little on their own, and they need people like you around them to be saying housing matters. We need more housing in our community for us, for our families, for the people who work in our community. And we are going to stand behind you if you we want you to make those decisions, and we'll stand behind you when you do. And I would put that out as a pretty easy way to get involved. Vote. I think voting is really low here. Vote, and when somebody comes and asks you what you care about, say, I care about people having a safe and affordable place to live. Beyond that, you can use your muscle to go and volunteer, help build homes, help work on shelters and places that need repair. We can't afford to lose our housing stock. You can contribute a bit of money if you've got that. You can donate items to the Restore, and they can be turned into houses as well. But there's something that you can do, and this is the moment we really need all hands on deck. And this is not just about what are the feds doing and what are the city councils doing. It's about what you're doing too.
So Julia, you were a big part of Civic Action, which really spoke to your engagement in community and engaging community members to take action in where they live. Is there a big takeaway for you? That was an incredible organization you led. There's incredible change that came out of it. I think we have a community, I can't remember the number, Rob. I remember when you were doing Strat Plan, we looked at the number of volunteers out of this organization that do a whole host of things. Civic engagement is really important. It's an important part of our ethos. It's an important part of change. Oftentimes we wait for governments to do all kinds of things. Money's always a challenge. It's a challenge on every front in every sector. But there are also ways of coming together. So just give us a little bit of flavor on the impact civic action can have, civic engagement can have on communities for change.
Yeah, well, I think it goes back a bit to networks. Most people want to be engaged, and most people care about where they live, but they may not have the place to enter. And so some simple things are saying, who's missing from this conversation? Who could add something, perspective to this that we may not be aware of? And that probably comes up a lot in the university setting. You're studying civic issues. You're talking about legal developments. Who is that actually affecting, and have you talked to the people that it's going to affect? But to ask that question, who's missing from our table? It can be in governance things as well. If you've got committees within the university setting, I think that's a simple way to bring people into conversations and let them loose. You never know what they're going to do. I see so much interesting work happening at this university that is very connected to real life. Thinking about where are those connection points with the community that you can bring your research, you can bring your work, and Windsor's got a big tradition of that. But maybe it could extend to other parts of the university as well. Offering up your intellectual capital is huge. So sometimes people think a charity just needs donations, but often having somebody who knows how to do deep and detailed research into housing issues, somebody who knows how to use technology, can do a lot in the community, and it can be very gratifying and give you work experience as well if you're looking to build. So if you're a student and there are things that matter to you, find those places to connect. Offer yourself out as a volunteer. It's a way to give back to the community. It feels good. You actually see the impact, and you can use it to help you decide what you're doing in the future.
Awesome. So I am going to open to questions because we really do want this to be a dialogue. So I'm giving you a heads up. I have a number of questions that were submitted. I really would like to open up to the audience. So let me warm you up, think about what you want to ask, and I will take one of the questions from online if you don't mind. So any advice for dealing with the political realities? Should charities, community service organizations, etc., invite politicians to be volunteers and to sit on their boards? Do you participate with the politics of the day, or do you attempt to remain nonpartisan and avoid engaging where possible?
Oh boy, that's a couple of questions, isn't it? Politicians on your board, that's not, I wouldn't be my preferred choice, because the politicians, they have a mandate and they have a perspective, and that can change. I think you want to be able to. I like to work on issues that any politician can see them in, no matter their party. And the minute you have a politician on your board, it makes it harder for people to see it as a nonpartisan issue. So housing, youth entrepreneurship, integrating skilled immigrants, teaching children to read. There's no reason why a diehard conservative should have a problem with those, or the most left-leaning socialist. Those are things that I think are just fundamentals. That's always been my perspective, is you want to appeal to as many people as possible. So I think having a politician on your board would be a problem. Dealing with politicians, though, is super important. And I do a lot of government relations. I spend a lot of time in Ottawa, and I will meet with Liberal ministers, Elizabeth May, who leads the Green Party, the Conservatives. I need to know what they're all thinking and talk to them all the time. And it's part of my role. I enjoy it, and it allows you to bake your thinking into what they're thinking. I think what would surprise people who don't do any government relations is at the end of the day, these are normal human beings who are ministers. They are trying to do their best. They may not be doing it the way you like it, but they're hungry for information and ideas. And you'd be amazed at if you have a good idea and you keep going at it, it can make its way into a budget. It can make its way into an initiative, and that's quite wonderful. At Civic Action, we were trying to deal with this issue of how do you help people who are on welfare go back to work, and they kept getting stymied by losing a lot of benefits as soon as they earned a certain amount of money. But by working through that and supporting the government and thinking about it, it ended up being a massive federal program, the Working Income Tax Benefit, which was quite tremendous. So you can definitely influence policy and law from the outside, and it's quite exciting when you do. We're doing that with Habitat now, and Lindsay will know. It might surprise some of you, for every Habitat home we build in Windsor, we have to pay $60,000 in HST. And we get federal funding, not for forgivable loans, of $50,000. So it's like a shell game. Thank you for this, and here you have it back again. And so we're doing a lot of work to try and get the federal government to take the HST off affordable owned homes. They're going to be kept affordable for 20 years. Why burden the homeowner, which is a working family with low income, why burden them with that tax payment? Charge it at the end if it ever goes back to the market. So policy is very rooted in solving some of these challenges, and you have to tackle it if you're serious about them.
I think a great message on policy,
and you've built massive buildings and done all kinds of things in healthcare that must have had you intimately working with government.
You've got to be partners. You've got to be partners, right?
Yeah.
So, audience, who's got a question out there? The lights are so bright. There we go.
So
Hi.
As a counselor in Kingsville, the day after I got elected, we were told, your development charges were going to be challenged. But there is a need to build more homes faster, and I agree with that. But I also agree that growth should also pay for growth. So the big question is, what is your definition between affordable and attainable?
So people people who don't aren't familiar with that term, attainable, it's that people who have the money to pay a mortgage and enter into and pay a down payment, but there's no stock available for them to buy. For us, affordable is a home where people are not going to have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs, and that's what we focus on. So that's our definition. And a Habitat home, people do not make a down payment, so that's a huge thing. So we're working with working families who have enough to pay a decent monthly amount on their mortgages. They can sustain a home, but they don't have that money for a down payment, and they need some help to keep the mortgage payments affordable over time. Development should pay for itself. It's an interesting concept, although I think more and more people are saying, is development helping the people who are already there, and isn't that something that should be shared? But I recognize that it varies a lot community to community, and congratulations to you for taking on that role of counselor. It's a tough role. It's a tough role. You've got a big responsibility.
Next question. Yes, mic to the center.
Really nice to meet you. As an ex-president of one of the Rotary clubs in Windsor chapters, I would like to know, what is your involvement with Rotary, and how much do you take support from them or give support to them for their projects?
Wow. So I remember a time when Rotary didn't let women be members. This is pretty cool to see a president of Rotary. I love that. And Rotary has evolved greatly. And of course, I wouldn't be living if it wasn't for Rotary, because my father came here because of Rotary. So I owe you big time. And maybe some people, younger people, might not be as familiar with Rotary, but it's a massive service organizations around the world. The thing we're doing that's most interesting with them right now is solar panels. And in the US, there's a really well-defined partnership, and Rotary is helping to fund solar panels for Habitat homes. In the past, we would build homes for low-income people that were cheap, because that was the best way to get them built, but it often saddled families with quite high energy costs. So now we're looking to how do we build to reduce energy costs, and solar is one of the ways. So we're just starting that up in Canada. And I don't know if that would be of interest to your Rotary, but Lindsay will tell you that Habitat Windsor Essex is all over anything that's interesting and innovative, and I know that they'd love to talk to you, and we would be supporting that as well. But it's very nice to meet you.
Hello.
Hello again.
How are you?
Good.
That's good. So right now, I'm a law student at the dual program at University of Windsor, and I'm also the CEO and president of the University of Windsor Students Alliance. So it's a very interesting line to cross between the corporate world of law and then the nonprofit world of UWSA. So reflecting on your career transition and all of the experiences that you've had, what have been some of the most challenging aspects of moving from law to the nonprofit leadership that you're in currently, and what have been the most rewarding?
Well, I love what you're doing, and those were just a couple of the things you do. You are an extremely involved person, but you're a great example of you're doing your studies, but you're immersed in a business. Running the student government is huge business, and learning about governance and how do you interact with a university administration, suppliers, satisfy the needs of students. So it's a great way to get exposure to things. And I'm sure some of them you say, I will never do this again in my whole life. But you know how to do them, which is really, really important. So law, I practice in a very, very nice law firm. Lots of resources, brilliant people. And there was no end to my ability to get things done because there were always people to help. But I remember going to TD Bank again. I shouldn't pick on them. But talking to somebody about, I don't know what I was talking about. And but how were our roles comparable? And he said, well, you know, I have 33,000 people reporting to me, and you have 15. And your budget's, wherever it was, $2,500 a year. It was something ridiculous. And I said, well, that's true. But when you go to a big law firm and you want to get a deal done, you pay them a huge amount of money and they get the deal done. And if I want them to help me create a carbon emission reduction fund, they do it for free because it matters. And I can convince them to do that. And he looked at me and he went, no. And you could see the penny dropping, that you go from having power and money and controlling people to being able to get things done through influence. And it's all about influence in the not-for-profit sector. And to his credit, that person ended up taking a leading role in the organization I was with because he got it. So that's a big thing, is all of a sudden you have no resources and you have to create them from nothing. But money follows good ideas all the time, rarely the other way around. And if you have a great idea, it's just a matter of when is its time come, for sure.
It's a great example also of influence, public sector, private sector.
Yeah.
I think my greatest learning when I finished my public sector leadership role and started doing directorship in the private sector and the corporate sector is there's so many similarities. It's just good people trying to do their best work. Mm-hmm. And so the influence you can have, in that example, you influenced him. You influenced his career, you influenced the way he thought about things. I think sharing those stories are so critical in terms of learnings.
The other thing is that in the private sector, people, and this is a gross generalization, but are largely motivated by money, and they're doing their job because they get a good salary. In our sector, we don't get paid as well. And people are not always doing it. They're generally not doing it just for money. They're doing it because it matters. And so you can't influence them by saying, I'm going to give you a bonus, because they don't really care. You can influence them by saying, if you do this, it's going to make you really happy because 3 more families are going to be housed. It's going to make you happy because you're going to have made a difference in people's lives, and that matters a lot. You also have to have a workplace that is much more values driven, because that matters to people, and people will put up with a lot more when they're getting paid too much. Yeah, we don't get paid too much.
No.
I'm
going to go to the online questions. I have a couple questions from counselors, so I'm going to try to pull them together. Aside from direct financial support, what measures could the municipalities implement to support partners seeking to address housing supply in the affordable, attainable space? So what can they do to help? What barriers can be removed? What can municipalities be doing? What should they be doing?
Land. Land is so hard for us to get, and it's so costly. I know that different municipalities have different amounts of land available, but the most successful habitats are working with their municipalities. The municipalities are providing land at usually at $1, because it's going to create housing in places where it otherwise probably wouldn't be built. And Habitat can build very efficiently and build multi-unit homes often. They're not just single-family homes, and show what's possible. So land is a huge one. Municipal processes. I was in Kelowna. We're always going to be in Kelowna, it seems, today, where they have completely streamlined the process for approvals, and you can do it all online. And there are just a lot of things that are approved as of right. You don't have to go through any committee. They just say, here's what you can do. Plug in your property. It'll tell you all the things you can do. It'll now tell you what money you can get to support you in doing those things. And they made it even speedier for not-for-profit housing. So that sort of thing, I think, should be a role model. That Kelowna has invested quite heavily in their IT, but the director of IT there would share it with anybody. And why would anybody want to reinvent that horrible wheel? And then the last thing, money of course does matter. We had in Peterborough, they were building 1 or 2 houses a year with Habitat. They got a big property. They built a 41-unit condominium building, and the city waived fees related to parking and some other licensing that were worth $1 million. So it wasn't cash being donated, it was waiving some fees. But as a result, 41 homes were created, and they're now doing the second wave of 40. And it made it all possible. So that was quite a tremendous partnership as well. So land, permitting, getting beside us on getting the HST off properties. But great partnerships. And I think there's been good partnership here with the city as well, and hopefully that will continue.
Last question from the audience. Yes. Oh, Rob.
The hard one.
Yes, sir.
Julie, I really appreciate the conversations that you've had the last few days on campus and certainly your insights. And you've mentioned a few examples of how our students have been working with Habitat on initiatives here in Windsor and Kelowna and other places as well. And we're really proud of that. I think a lot of our students do feel that volunteering is maybe a little bit more specific than it actually needs to be with Habitat. Can you maybe elaborate on some of the opportunities that we could be highlighting to our students to get more engaged in working as part of their academic programs, as part of their research, but also as part of their spare time to really be volunteering, and what that might be able to provide opportunities for them around as well too?
Yeah, and Lindsay's here, so I might pick on her to speak to it because she probably knows more about the details. We have build sites where we often have volunteers come, and we don't build corrals like you did in Kelowna, but we build homes. We do drywalling, we do landscaping, we do painting, we do you name it, and you can volunteer to go on a build site, and I can guarantee you if you do it, you'll never forget it. People say, I know that house has my signature on a 2x4. It's really, really thrilling, and you often are working alongside a family who will be moving into that home. So volunteering on a build site is really important. Our restores are social enterprise. We have 110 across Canada. There are thousands around the world now, and it was a made in Manitoba invention. You can go volunteer at the restore. You can do marketing. You can work in the back area. You can fix things. You can be a salesperson. You can do events, very one-off sorts of things. You can organize people to do drives to donate things to the restore, construction materials, home goods, etc. And that's a big one for us. Our staff can always use people who have expertise with IT or communications and things, and just volunteer, and that can be a nice one-off thing as well to do. And then you're in a special place if you want to organize some discussions or groups to talk about housing and what can happen in your community, to have somebody from Habitat come and feed that idea. It's Ford City, where there's this beautiful community garden, and I'm sure you've all been there, where there are the incredible murals on the walls. And the community garden was, I think, a pretty bedraggled, yucky place. And Habitat led the refurbishment of that garden, and I'm sure there were a lot of volunteers involved in planting and you name it there. And some of the projects at the women's shelter, at the drop-in center, where they've done work to change. So there's always help needed, and Habitat treats its volunteers beautifully. Lots of t-shirts, lots of thanks. I have so many t-shirts. Is there anything you'd add, Lindsay?
I guess I would just say currently, if we're looking for current what's going on, you spoke about being on the build site, so we are trying to scale up at this moment. So we've actually started hiring a construction company to take that over. We still have build days for the purpose of community, because the whole idea is the home is being built to be in the community and house a family, a part of your community. So we don't want to miss that part or never have that part. But the critical repairs program that you spoke about is blowing up, and we don't have enough bodies, and if you have a skill that you can bring to that is super, super important. But if not, we have people that can train. You mentioned the restore, and I think that's a great piece too, because I would say 75% of the people that work in the restore are volunteers, and we need to have that database. So regardless of, you can't commit every single week, you can commit 5 hours a month, anything like that is very, very important. And then I would say last is connecting resources, connecting people, whether it's, someone in your family that can donate a refrigerator, a couch, or anything like that, because we take those, we resell, and those funds go right back to directly building homes in the area. So I would say those three right now are our focuses, for sure.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, no, that's really, it's great to get the specifics, and it's just a wonderful organization to be part of.
Julia, Time's up already.
Oh,
I
I
just-
wanted to turn the things back to you.
Oh, I could talk to you for forever. You have been such a delight to have on campus.
Well, thank you.
Inspiring conversations. We've talked about some really challenging issues. You shared lots of your insights into potential solutions. I want to, on behalf of the university, thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would also like to thank all of you for participating in the dialogue, the conversation. I hope you're taking away lots of ideas on how to continue to engage both at the university, but importantly in the community, to make things better for everyone. And before you leave today, we are very fortunate to have the sponsorship of Telus for the Chancellor's Leadership Series and for the scholarship. And I'd like to thank them and ask you just to watch a wonderful short video.
I want to know who and what I am. I want to know the nature of me beyond where I've been. I was in the foster care system for 10 years. I describe my time in foster care as extremely traumatic. In care, I was neglected, emotionally abused, disbelieved. It was incredibly harmful, and it's something that I'm struggling with even today. There are a lot of things that I've been through that didn't need to occur. And so I want to ensure that the pains and struggles that I've been through as a child does not happen to any other kid. Eventually, I hope to get a PhD and to transform the child welfare system in Canada. I was absolutely overjoyed when I heard that I received the Telus student bursary. Now I can focus on school, study instead of take up a part-time job. This bursary will allow me to reach my dreams, create change in the world. It makes me feel valued.
So inspiring. Thank you all very much.